Hey, in this video we're going to implement the admin authentication of our booking system. So that means we're going to make the admin backend ourselves. We're not going to use a CMS for it. There are a lot of different approaches you could take. You could use an all-in-one solution like Firebase or Supabase to handle the authentication and then also the storage for the images. However, I opted to do this myself with a JWT, as I've showed you in one of the previous videos. It's really fast because we're going to do it on the edge in NextJS middleware. It's going to be secure and it's just overall going to be really good with a lot of advantages that I'm going to go through in the video. So in the end, there will be protected routes through middleware that nobody can access unless they are logged in as an admin. And then the admin can, later on in the project, add menu items or change the opening times. But this is the cornerstone of the whole authentication. And we're also going to authenticate the API routes. So not anybody can call something like the add menu items route later on, but only an authenticated admin can. And before getting into the code, I'm going to show you exactly what we're going to build, and then let's dive right in. Okay, so here we are. I've got my coffee ready, and I say we get right into it. And what we're going to do in this video, let me show you. So let me move this over here. We're going to implement the admin login. So that means there's going to be a dashboard for the, the admin, the manager of the restaurant, for example, who can log in with an email address, which is going to be admin@email.com, and the password, which is just going to be admin. Now we could also implement a remember me functionality. That's going to be very easy, but I don't think we're going to do it in this video. And then we can sign in. And then in the sign-in, there's going to be an authenticated action, which could just be adding something to the menu, right? So a title, a description of the food item that you want to add to the menu, and an image. And then this button right here, this is a button if you can tell, would be to add something to the menu. As you can see right here, I've called it admin.sensitive, just to make it very clear that only authenticated admins can do this action. And they can only do it so long as the JWT, which we're going to use not for performance, but for authentication, right here, is actually legit. And if we take a look at how long this JWT is legit, so we can do that at jwt.io and then paste it right here. We can see I've created it on Friday the 6th of January 2023 at 12:28, and it is valid until 12:29. So it is only valid 1 minute. So that means probably 1 minute has passed since the login. So let me try to do this authenticated action. And as you can see, I can't anymore because my JWT has expired. So I can't do anything in the dashboard. And when I try to refresh, it will prompt us to log in again. And so essentially, in this video, we're going to implement this admin authentication to our booking system. And we're going to do that with the methods I've showed you in one of the last videos, which is going to be a JWT cookie authentication. And I say we get started. So let me end the server and then get into this project right here, which is the one, I've got two projects. This is the one we're doing on YouTube. And this is the project, which is essentially the same, but where I just play around in the code, try things out. And when they work, then I'm implementing them here in the real YouTube project that we're doing together. Okay, so let's check out this local host we have in the YouTube folder. So let's restart the page. As we can see, we had the date picker from last video. However, there is no login route yet. That's what we're going to implement first. Okay, now to implement the login route, we're going to go to source and then pages. And then here we're just going to create the login.tsx, which is going to pose as our login route. There we go. And I'm going to close the console right here. I just kept getting errors. There we go. Okay, so now we've got the login route, and inside of here we want the input fields, right? So we want the username and the password, and just to make it look pretty, we could actually just copy over the login component to skip over the whole CSS thing. Let me know if you guys are okay with that, if we skip over some of these CSS, or if you actually want to build out just the bare bones, so make it really ugly, and then literally just build everything from scratch, or if you're fine with me just pasting some stuff when it's mainly CSS based, but also explaining obviously what we're doing. So I'm just going to paste this in. However, if you actually want to build everything from scratch, that's totally fine too. It's just going to look a bit more ugly. but I guess that's the compromise. Okay, so we've got inputs, right? And we want to keep these state. So we'll have the username and the password. So we're not gonna type them out explicitly, but instead we are gonna just infer the state type from the object we're gonna pass in here. And we see we have an email and we also have a password. Now what should these be by default? Well, let's just initialize them as empty strings, like that. We've imported the state, and then we also want a handle change. Now, to get the type we need for the handle change, we can type an E right here, hover over it, and literally just copy the type because we are working in TypeScript. So we can have a const handle change right here, which is going to take an event, which is going to be of the type we've just copied. So that's really handy. We can literally just paste that. That's going to be an arrow function. And now in here, we want to destructure two things, the value and the name from the e.target. And then if I enable GitHub Copilot, it's probably going to catch on to what we're trying to do here. So we're setting the input to whatever it was previously, and then dynamically changing the name to whatever value we're passing. All right, and with that done, we still have two arrows. So let's see. Okay, so we have the arrow right here, which is going to be coming from tRPC in a second. And then we also have, okay, so we don't have the high log closed yet. So that is actually, I don't think that works. Let me just restart the console and then yarn add, because I think I'm using yarn in this. Yes, sir. So let's add React-icons, which is an NPM library just for icons in React, as the name already suggests, really convenient. And then we can say import high log closed from React-icons/hi, which stands for hero icons. And then this error should be gone. All right, the error is gone. Now, there's one more error, which is the error right here, the login. So whenever the login fails, when we submit the data to the login backend route, and the login fails, we want to show an error on the front end. So let's get to doing that. Now, because I'm working with tRPC, that's going to be really convenient. However, if you're working with regular Next.js, you could follow along just fine. It's just going to be an API route that we're creating here. And for my case, it's going to be a tRPC route on the server. So that's going to be neither here nor there. So let's create a new one called admin.ts. Now in this admin.ts, it's the equivalent of a Next.js API route. We're going to export const admin router, which is going to be, wait, is that going to be an arrow function? Let me check that. Oops. Admin, just see what I did here. No, that's not going to be an arrow function, which is going to be a router. Now that router comes from the .trpc. So that's going to be this one right here. So we're exporting the router. This is where we're getting it from. And then let me close some files right here. This is getting really, what's the word, like when it's not easy to see everything? I forgot the word. But okay, we have the router. Now inside of this router, we want a login, right? Which is going to be a public procedure. And why am I not getting any type? Okay, because VS Code is still loading. Procedure. And if it lets me type. Now we would also probably want to import this, but since VS Code is taking a long time to load right now, let's give it a hot second, wait for it to finish loading, and then we'll also get the import help. Okay, there we go, it finished loading. Now we can import that from .trpc as well. And then we can say, well, what do we want this to be? A mutation. But before we do that, we also want an input. Now the input is going to be a z.object. To validate the type of it, we're going to use Zod, so from Zod. And essentially, if you're not familiar with this, what we're doing is we're creating an endpoint which everybody can call, so you don't need to be authenticated to call this API endpoint. And then we're expecting data from the body. So this is what we're doing right here. Normally, if you do a fetch request, this would go as json.stringify in the fetch body, but we are using tRPC, so we can pass it as an actual JavaScript object. Okay, now we're expecting a username right here, which is going to be a z. Actually, no, we want an email, which is going to be a z.string.email, conveniently. And then we also want a no, we still don't want the username, want a password, which is going to be a z.string. Okay, Now, since we're making a post request, we're going to have this as a mutation, as an asynchronous mutation, because we are going to do some asynchronous action in here. More specifically though, let's start with destructuring the response from the context. Now, the context is something we get from here, so we can destructure the context and the input, and I don't think we have the response on the context yet. So how do we get access to the response in our API route that we're writing here? Well, if you're following along in regular Next.js, that's really easy because you receive that as a parameter in the function. However, we are not. So we're going to go into the context, and then in here, in the create context, we can say const res is equal to opts, and we can also get the request. So we get this from the options, and then we can say get rid of this and just return an object that has the response and the request. And we can also pass Prisma if we need it later. So essentially we're skipping this whole step. Okay, now we can destructure the response from the context, and we can also destructure the email and the password from the input. Now we can actually work on validating the email and the password. And because we're making admin login, we want to have these in our env file. So implementing something like NextAuth would be a total overkill for this project. So let's say admin auth, and let's say admin username is equal to, no, we want admin email is going to be equal to admin@email.com, and admin password is going to be admin. So these are the credentials that the admin is going to log in with. And implementing these in this fashion, instead of having NextAuth, makes things way simpler to work with. And also way simpler for you to change these credentials if you're doing this for a freelance client, say, and the client wants something changed. No problem at all. Okay. Now, if the email is equal to the process.env.admin_, and the password is going to be equal to the process.env.admin password, and then we want something to happen. So essentially this means the user is authenticated. Did it just say ain't an admin? User is authenticated as admin. And let me disable GitHub Copilot. I don't think it's a huge help right here. So what we want to do is create a token, which is going to be something that we import from another package that I've shown you also in the JWT authentication video called JOES. And what JOES allows us to do in comparison to something like JSON Web Token is also validate JWT on the edge in the Next.js middleware, which we're going to utilize to ensure that this is proper authentication. So we're not going to use an API route for that. However, to do that, we want to create a cookie and then pass that, like a JWT cookie, and pass that back to the client once they are authenticated, right? And we do that by creating a new sign JWT, which is something we get from JOES, invoke that as an empty object, and then we can string some functions on here. So set protected header, and in here we're going to pass the algorithm, which is going to be, well, no TypeScript annotations here, but we can say HS256. That is going to be the algorithm we are signing our cookies with. Then the set JTI, which is going to be the JSON Web Token ID. That is going to be nano ID. Invoke that, and that is also a dependency that we haven't installed yet. And there we go. And then we can say import, is that a named import? Yes, it is. Nano ID from nano ID. All right. And then after we've set the JWT ID, we can say set issued at, which is going to be nothing. So that's going to be right now by default. And then we're going to say dot set expiration time. Now, depending on the security level of your application, you'd choose a different expiration time here. And this is what I mentioned in the start of the video. If the user clicks remember me, then you could dynamically increase this time to go way beyond what you normally do. In the test application, I had 1 minute, but let's keep this at, you know, something like 1 hour. I think that's going to be totally fine for an admin to make changes, and then the key will get expired. And then the most important thing, we're going to sign this. Well, what are we going to sign with? With a new text encoder, there we go, which we're going to invoke, and then .encode and get JWT secret key as whatever we're signing it with. Now, where the hell is this get JWT secret, and actually let's call it key, where's that coming from? No annotations here, right? We can't just import it from Joe's or something. That is something we're going to create ourselves. So let's go into the src and then create a new folder called lib. So preparing libraries for this project pretty much. Then let's have an auth.ts. And let me also navigate to this auth.ts here on the previous project I did. And then let's care about the JWT secret key first, which is going to be a very straightforward function, get JWT secret key, which is going to be a string. And let's see what this does. Okay, so the const secret that we need is going to be equal to the process.env and let's call this JWT secret key. Okay, so we are just getting the key from our environment files. Let's have JWT and then JWT secret key. So this is the secret key we're going to be signing our JWTs with. And you could do whatever you want here. Honestly, you could just have key, which would be a horrible idea. You could also generate a password in the web, which is also a horrible idea. And then we can also just literally type stuff on our keyboard. However, make sure it is base64 compatible, so URL friendly pretty much. Okay, and we need to fix that. There we go. Now we can have this secret key right here. This is not a public one. Make sure it is not public. This is only going to be exposed to the server. And then if we don't have the secret, if we don't have the secret, or the secret dot length is equal to 0. So if we've not defined the secret, then let's throw that as an error. Throw a new error. A JWT secret key is not defined. Let's enable GitHub Copilot. Maybe it gives some good suggestions. We can go out of this if statement, and then we're just gonna, exactly return the secret. So this is where we are getting our JWT secret key from, that we're gonna use to sign this token right here. And then we can send this token back to the client. Now, how do we do that? Well, we can say, that's why we imported the res, by the way, the response. We're gonna say res.set header. And this header, and this is annoying, res.set header, and then the set dash cookie. And then as the second argument, we're gonna pass the cookie, which is another package we haven't installed yet, yarn add cookie, which is gonna be a default import cookie from cookie. There we go. This is just a very handy library that we're gonna use to work with cookies. We can just copy this, yarn add type / cookie for TypeScript, but make sure to add that as a dev dependency, because we won't need that in production whatsoever. That is gonna fix the error. And then we can say cookie.serialize to actually create the cookie that we want to pass back to the client. So what do we want our cookie to be named? Well, I just usually name my user token, which is pretty verbose, but make sure no matter what you call it, like it doesn't matter what you call it, but it has to be consistent across the whole application. That's very important. Then the token we're gonna send back to the client, the one we've just created up here. And then we are gonna pass some settings. These settings are gonna be HTTP only, which is not gonna be only, but which is gonna be true. Then the path, which is just gonna be the home page, and then secure. Yes, if we are in process.env. Well, not .environment, but if we are in production. So if we are in production, then we want the cookie to be secure. And that's pretty much all we need to do. So at the bottom here, we can just say return an object with a success of true, which we're not gonna be working with on the front end anyways, but let's just call that for good semantics. And then if the user is not authenticated, so if they send the wrong information, then we're gonna throw a new tRPC error, which is gonna state something along the lines of, codes unauthorized, and then as a message we're gonna say invalid email or password. There we go. Okay, and now we're not going to work with this message on the front end. We're just going to display a generic message that you're going to see here in a second. Now to send the information that we are gathering from the front end to the back end right here, we're going to have a new mutation. So const destructuring, worry about that later, is going to be equal to tRPC dot, oh, and we haven't implemented the router yet, so we need to go into our main router and then say admin is admin router. So here we are just connecting all the routers. We can get rid of the example router, by the way, and then say trpc.admin.login.use mutation. There we go. Now what can we destructure from this? Well, let's see. There's a bunch of stuff actually. What we want is the mutate. And we can call it whatever we want. Let's call it login so we are sure what it does. And then whenever we click the button that says login right here, we're going to call this login mutation we've just created right here. And what are we going to pass to it? Well, the input, which is going to be the email and the password. And that all goes to this backend route. So if you're following along in regular plain old Next.js, this information would be sent in a post request to your API route, which is then received in the API route, and then essentially the same logic would happen. The syntax would be a bit different, but essentially you'd sign a JWT secret key if the email and password is correct, if it's matching the env values, and if it is, then you're signing the cookie and sending that back. That's all we're doing. So how do we get this error? Because we still need that. Well, very easy. We can just say error. So that is the beauty of tRPC. We can literally just get the error like this. We can also get something like is error, right? If there is an error, we could also just do that. It's going to be a Boolean, which might be semantically better. So if is error, then invalid login credentials. All right, let's save that. Let's start up the server again, like that. And then let's take a look at what this looks like. So this is our login route. As I said, this is just the pasted CSS. If we did this without any CSS, this would look ugly as hell. But we can say admin@email.com. Just say admin right here. Click sign in. We don't want to save that. Well, nothing happens yet when we sign in. But if we go to the storage and then cookies, we can see there is a user token. So that seems to work just fine. Now, what do we want to happen when the user is successfully logged in? Well, on success, we can just call that. An arrow function is going to be invoked, and we also need the router for this. So const router is equal to use router that we get from Next.js that we can use to navigate the user to your routes. So router.push, and then we're going to say /dashboard. Now, if you're making a large application, you'd usually keep these in a config or constants to keep them synchronized across all of the application. We might also do that, but as of now, it's really a small application, so we can just keep it like that. Okay, so the user is pushed to a route called dashboard. Let's save that. Let's go back in, admin@email.com, admin. These are valid credentials, and then we're pushed to a new dashboard route. Great, now that doesn't exist yet, so let's create that in the pages. It's gonna be dashboard.tsx. There we go. This is gonna be a normal component. And that also exists now. However, this is not secured. Everybody could navigate to this route, whether they are authenticated or they are not. And that is a problem. This should be a very sensitive page with actions that only an admin can do, which we're separately going to authenticate, by the way, no worries. So even if you get to the page somehow without being an admin, then you could still not do anything on there. But still, only an admin should be able to see this in the first place. How do we do that? Well, we do that in Middleware, and this doesn't exist yet. But in Next.js, before every request, something that is called middleware can get invoked if we want it. And we do. So let's create a new middleware.ts. And then let me check right here. Essentially, this is what we're gonna do in the middleware. We're gonna get the token from the user, and if it exists, then we are gonna allow the redirect to the dashboard. If the token doesn't exist, then or is invalid, then we're not going to allow a redirect to the dashboard. That's pretty much all the logic. It's like 40 lines of code, not even. It's very simple. So let's get started. So syntactically, the middleware is created by export async function middleware that is given by NextJS, and then the request is going to be a next request. There we go. Okay, now we've got our middleware. That's all we need to do. But we do want something called a config in here, which is going to take an object, and this is going to define when our middleware is going to run. Now, if you want to go more in depth, I went a little more in depth in my JWT authentication video that I did. Export const config. There we go. This takes an array, and in here we are defining whenever this middleware should run. So only if the route /dashboard or /login is called. Now we also want to authenticate the API, but we're not going to do that through the middleware. We're going to do that through tRPC because that's going to be more convenient. Okay, so now first step, get token from user. How do we do that? Well, we can say const token is equal to, and we're getting the token from the request because cookies are passed with every request. We can say rec.cookies.get. And it's called user-token. And if that exists, we want to get the value because we can't assume it exists. Maybe it doesn't if the user has never visited the page. And okay, now the second step is validate if the user is authenticated. So we've got the token. Now we're checking, are they authenticated or not? Well, how do we do that? That's going to be a little more complicated, but not complicated whatsoever if you compare it to if we did this with JSON Web Token, for example. And the reason being that if we were working with JSON Web Token, then we couldn't do this on the edge. But because we're working with JOs, and I'm going to guide you through how to do this, we are going to be able to verify the JWT on the edge. So verified token is going to be equal to the token exists, so let's just assume that. If it doesn't, this is going to be false either way. And then we're going to await something. So await verify auth, and we're going to pass the token. Now, how do we verify auth a token? This is not something that comes from anywhere. So you probably already know the drill. We get it from the lib. So in here, we're going to have the auth file, and we're getting the key, but we also want to do something else, which is going to be the verify auth. So export const verify auth, which is going to take a token, which is going to be a string. And essentially we are verifying the token inside of this function. Now to do this, we're going to have a try catch. So this is going to be asynchronous, and the verified, let's call it const verified, is going to equal the await JWT verify. Now this is something we get from the library we've installed called JOs. Import JWT verify from JOs, like that. And then in here, we're going to pass something, which is going to be the token that we're getting, and also a new text encoder, because it also needs to know what key it was signed by, right? So encode get JWT secret key, which is the same thing that we already did on the backend. Remember, let me close some things here. I believe we called it admin. There we go. Remember, it was signed with this key. So that means if we're verifying it, we also need to check, was it signed with this key? Therefore, we are passing the key right here. And then we are going to return the verified dot. We can see the protected header or the payload. We want the payload as user JWT payload. Now, if you have any questions about this whole process, I go even more in depth in the video I've done on the admin auth with JWT. If you want to check that out, I will link it, I believe, in the description. Okay, now the user JWT payload type doesn't exist yet, and it's going to be the JTI, a string, the JSON Web Token ID, and also the IAT, the issued ad, which is going to be a number. There we go. Now, what do we want to happen when the error catch happens? So if the token is not valid, this will throw an error, and then we're catching it right here. We're going to throw a new error saying your token is invalid or expired, whatever you want. Okay, and that, my friends, is pretty much all we are going to do in here. Now we can import the verify auth right here. And also, do we need to pass something to that? No, we don't, but we are going to catch something happens. We're going to get the error, and then we're just going to console log the error. There we go. So if anything goes wrong, we are throwing the error right here. Your token is invalid. catching that right here and then logging that to the console. So now we've got the verified token. If the user is authenticated as an admin, or the token is not going to be, like this value is going to be falsy if the user is not authenticated. And that allows us to do some interesting stuff. So if the request.nextURL.pathname.starts-with login, so if the user is trying to navigate to the login page and there is no verified token, then good, right? There is no verified token, user is trying to navigate to login, everything is fine, nothing will happen. They can do that, they are free to go. Let's get the URL in the next step. It's going to be rec.url because we are going to need it in multiple places right now. So if the URL, if the URL dot includes the /login, so if the user has already gotten a valid token but is trying to navigate to the login, so and there's a verified token, then we're going to redirect him to the dashboard, right? Because there is no point in logging in again. They are already authenticated. So we're going to say next response dot redirect, and then we're going to redirect to a new URL, which is going to be the /dashboard with a rec.url as the base URL. We're passing as the second parameter. Okay. Now, if the token is not valid, if there is no verified token, then what do we want to happen? This is where we could also validate or protect the API routes, which we're not going to do because we're going to do that with tRPC. We're just going to return the next response. Essentially, we can just copy this. There we go. We're going to return not to the dashboard, but to the login. So if the user is trying to go to the dashboard, the middleware is going to run. We're going to check, do they have a verified token? And if they don't, then no, you got to go to the login first, and then you got to log in. That's all the logic we're going to have in here. So let's reload the page. And wait, that still seems to work. This is my, oh yeah, my token is probably still valid. It's kind of unfortunate that I set it to 10 minutes. That's quite a long time. So token is not going to be invalidated anytime soon probably. But we can check the login if that works. If we go to the login, oh no, you gotta go to the dashboard because you're already logged in as an admin. You Dumbo, why are you trying to go to the login? No, you gotta go to the dashboard. Okay, so that seems to be working just fine. However, we also, remember, want to have handle sensitive actions in the tRPC route, right? We want to create menu items, for example. We want to change the opening times. These are actions only an admin should be allowed to do. Well, how do we do that? Well, we can go to tRPC. Let me just navigate to that here. And then let's create a const is admin. So this is going to be a middleware that runs every time we're going to use our admin procedure, which is going to be a t.middleware. Now we want this middleware to be asynchronous because we are going to be verifying the token in here. And now we can destructure some things, which is going to be the, well, we can't see that yet. So let's not do that yet. Let's invoke this function first. Now we can see what we can destructure. There's a bunch of useful stuff. We are just going to need the context and the next though. So the next is going to be a function we call whenever everything is fine and we want the action to just go on. And if not, so if in this case the guy is not authenticated, it's trying to use our API route, then we're going to throw an error that's going to prevent the API route from being called. Okay, so const request is going to be to the context. That's why we need the context because we want to destructure the request. And the token, remember in the middleware, we got it like this. Now in the tRPC route, that's going to be slightly different. The token is going to be rec.cookies at the index of user dash token. This is how we get the cookie. Okay. This is still throwing an error, by the way, but I think because we're never returning, that should, yeah, okay, it is because of that. We will get to that. So if the token is not valid, right there, we're going to throw a new tRPC error, and that error is going to contain, the code of unauthorized, and then let's pass a, no, we don't want that. We want the message like that to be missing user token or something along of those lines. And then the const verified token, because we haven't validated the token yet, right? Oops, token. This could be anything. We're just checking, does it exist? This could be value ABC, right? If there is no token at all, then okay, we're missing user token. But because we're past this guard clause, doesn't mean the token is authenticated yet. We still need to check that. That's what we're doing in here. So await, verify auth, and then in here we're going to pass the token. Okay, that's going to validate our token. Now in the middleware, we caught that. I don't think we need to do that here. We could also catch that and then console log. That's up to you if you want to do that. I'm not going to worry about it here. And then if there is no verified token, so this is actually if there is a user token, but it's like expired or the user has messed with it, the little silly bugger, then we're just gonna throw the same error. Let's just copy paste it from up here, maybe with a different message, like invalid user token, like that. Okay, and if the user is authenticated, so user is authenticated as admin, then and only then are we going to return next, which means the API route is allowed to be called. Now to actually use this in a router, we're going to export a const called admin procedure, which is going to be equal to t.procedure, and then we get a method called use, which is essentially like you'd apply it in Express.js, for example, with isAdmin. isAdmin. So whenever this route is called, the admin procedure, we're going to use this middleware before anything happens to check if they are authenticated or not. So that means in here we could create our sensitive action. That's going to be an admin procedure, which we're going to import. And just for demonstration purposes, let's create this as a mutation. That's just going to return a string of sensitive. So this is information that only should be shown to the admin and only the admin can call that. Now to check if that works just fine, we're going to implement that on the dashboard. So let's just create a button in here, top secret action that nobody besides the admin can call, of type button. Now that button is going to do something. It's going to mutate from tRPC.admin.sensitive.useMutation. There we go. That is something we don't even have to pass information to do. So on click, we can literally just invoke the mutate without it needing additional information, and then see if that works. So we can say top secret action, click that. Next, that works just fine because we are logged in. However, let's try deleting our JWT. So let's get rid of the user token, refresh the page, and as you can see, we are getting redirected to the main dashboard. And if we not to the main dashboard, but to the login page, right? And if we go to the dashboard, that's what I meant to say, we can't. No way to get there. However, if we go to admin@email.com, if we log in with the correct data and then admin, click login, we're in the dashboard. We can, as you can see, there's no error thrown whenever we perform this action, so we can perform it just fine as an admin. However, if the JWT expires, or if you somehow get in here without the JWT existing, let's go to, where is it? Cookies, localhost. Let's get rid of this cookie. So just pretend it was invalidated for some reason, or it doesn't exist. Then if we try to do the top secret action, missing user token, we can't. And let's try tampering with the token. Let's create one. And I'm not too familiar how to do this in Firefox. So how about we do that in Chrome? Let's go to localhost. There we go, /login. I'm just doing this in Chrome, logging in admin@email.com, and then admin. Okay, here we are in the dashboard. And then let's just create a fake user token. So as you can see in the application, close that. We've got the user token. That works just fine. We are authenticated as an admin. Now let's try messing with this token. Let's just write something in here. The token was just tampered with. So it is unvalidated. So we should see an error. And we do. really, really nice. Your token is invalid. So we are noticing the token has been tampered with. The user has tried changing it, and therefore we're essentially pointing the middle finger at whoever just tampered with our token, saying, nope, you can't do this. This is not cool. And similarly, if we get rid of the cookie, then where did we create the middleware? I think that was in tRPC. Then this if statement is going to get run. We're missing a user token. So let's clear the console. You can see it better. Missing user token because we don't even have a token, not even one that was tampered with, just none at all. Great. That's going to be our admin authentication. And the reason I've done this with JWT is we are probably going to implement the image hosting for the menu items with S3, so an AWS service. Now I also looked into doing this whole thing with Supabase. Essentially, you could go so many different approaches, right? You could do the authentication with Supabase and then also the storage with Supabase or Firebase, if that's your thing. That would be totally doable as well. Or you could just do this how I did it with implementing the auth yourself with JWT. If you know how that works, which I've just shown you, so you know how that works, and then handling the storage with something like S3, which we're probably gonna do, or something like Cloudinary, which also works just fine. You know, there are a bunch of services that let you host images, and there are bundles who do this all for you in one package. So whatever you want to do is totally up to you. But one technology I want to learn in 2023 is something that has to do with AWS. I think that's very interesting, and also not very user-friendly, but just to get into AWS, see how that works. Okay, that's gonna be the admin authentication for our project. So on the front end, let me go through what we have so far. On the front end, we can pick a date and a time. And then on the back end, we can also log in as an admin. And then from there, we can change like the opening times that we've just gone through in the calendar. We can maybe select days on which the restaurant is going to be closed. And then we can also add and delete and all that stuff, menu items. So like pasta, for example, insert an image for pasta so that we can create a menu which the users can order from. Okay. That's going to be it for this video. I want to keep this as short as possible because it is quite a complex topic and we're already at a quite long video time. That's it for this video. In the next one, we're probably gonna get into the changing of the opening times. I think that's going to be the topic for the next video. And then we'll tackle S3 together. All right. Thank you for watching. That's going to be it for this video. Until the next one, have a good one and bye-bye.